The storm outside had been roaring for hours, but inside the small chapel, everything was quiet. The air smelled faintly of lilies and gun oil, an odd mix no one else noticed but her. Emma's hands trembled as she adjusted her white veil, her reflection trembling back at her in the mirror. For years, she'd buried that part of herself, the part that could read danger in silence, that could feel the shift in the air before chaos arrived. Today, she was supposed to be just a bride, but deep down, she knew peace never stayed long. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing who's listening. It started with a sound that didn't belong. The sharp crack of a window breaking somewhere near the chapel's back door. Guests turned their heads, puzzled, but Emma froze. That sound wasn't random. It was tactical, deliberate. Her heartbeat quickened. She scanned the faces of her loved ones, her groom, the priest, all blissfully unaware. Then came the second sound, a metallic click. She didn't need to look to know it. A safety being released. Emma didn't hesitate. Years of dormant training roared back to life. In one swift motion, she yanked her groom down to the ground, knocking over a row of chairs. Screams erupted. Glass shattered as masked men stormed in, weapons raised, shouting in a language she hadn't heard since her last mission. She hadn't thought she'd ever hear it again. For a moment, she was torn. The woman she'd become, and the warrior she'd once been colliding inside her. Her husband's eyes were wide with shock. "Emma, what's happening?" But she couldn't answer, because she was already calculating angles, exits, and enemy positions. There were 3 of them. No, 4. Moving like they'd done this before. And then, amid the chaos, a scent hit her. Diesel, cheap cigarettes, and metal polish. Her stomach turned. That smell belonged to one man, one she thought she'd left buried overseas. She thought she'd never see him again. She was wrong. Emma ducked behind a pew, grabbed the broken leg of a chair, and waited. When one of the men came close, she struck hard. Swift, precise, efficient. The kind of movement no civilian could ever make. Gasps echoed through the chapel. Even the intruders hesitated. One of them, taller than the rest, pulled off his mask. And there he was, Cade Mercer, the ghost from her past. "Didn't think I'd find you here, Captain," he sneered, his voice thick with venom. "Playing house now?" Emma rose slowly, her wedding gown torn, her breathing steady. She hadn't been captain in years, but hearing it again hit her like a jolt of electricity. "You shouldn't have come here," she said quietly. "Not today." What followed wasn't chaos, it was precision. The bride everyone thought was fragile became a storm. She disarmed one attacker with a twist, used a fallen pew as cover, and barked orders with the authority of someone who had once led men through fire. Outside, the rain turned torrential, drumming like war drums against the chapel walls. When Cade tried to grab one of the hostages, Emma didn't hesitate. She moved like a shadow, tackling him through the shattered window, both of them landing hard in the mud outside. The fight was brutal, raw, a collision of past and present. Every strike carried memory. Every block carried guilt. He'd been part of her old unit once, until he turned rogue. "Why, Cade?" she gasped, gripping his collar as they wrestled. "You walked away," he shouted back. "You don't get to pretend the blood isn't on your hands, too." For a brief second, the world paused, rain falling between them, the sound of sirens in the distance. The moral weight of his words hit her. Was he right? Could she really run from what she'd done? But then she looked through the chapel window, saw her husband shielding a crying child. And she knew some fights weren't about revenge. They were about protecting what you love. With one final move, she ended it. Clean, efficient, decisive. As the authorities arrived, she stood drenched in her wedding dress, torn lace clinging to her arms, mud streaking her face. Her past was no longer hidden. But neither was her strength. When her husband approached, trembling, he whispered, Who are you? Emma smiled faintly. Someone who finally stopped running. Inside, the guests sat in stunned silence. Then, one by one, they began to clap. Not out of celebration, but respect. Because sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do isn't to fight a battle. It's to face who they used to be. Because courage doesn't fade. It only waits for the right moment to return. And as the storm eased, sunlight broke through the clouds, landing softly on her face. The same light that had once guided her home. If you felt her courage, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us. Heroes aren't born, they're remembered.